So last video we talked about the chemise and drawers for my 1830s inspired Ariel look, or Ariel inspired 1830s look. And yes, I chopped my hair off. Anyway, the Little Mermaid story was published in the 1830s, which makes it the perfect era to do a Ariel inspired look for or in. And this video we're going to talk about the corset, which, as I always say in all my videos that talk about corsets, is the corset is really the fundamental part of a costume to create the proper silhouette for whatever era that you're making. And also in something like my Cinderella dress, it creates that classic silhouette, but also provides structure and support for the huge skirt that it has. So overall, a corset is just a must, especially in historical fashion. The 1830s are no exception. The interesting thing about this era of corsetry is that it's kind of the Regency style corset. It's just slightly morphed, headed towards the more classic silhouette that we think of when we think corset, which at least for me, it's like the 1860s to 1890s, that just kind of classic look. So it's kind of the morphed era. It's more though on the side of the Regency early 1800s. One of the main characteristics of that is the large hip gussets and bust gussets with a very large wooden busk in the center front. Another tidbit on this era is it's also kind of where we go from stays to corsets as far as calling this structure. So the corset-like structure in the Georgian era were called stays, and then through the Regency era, they were also called stays. But then we hit the 1830s, and this is where you hear the terminology corset coming in, and it's kind of in between the two, because I've seen people call them stays and I've seen people call them corsets when they're talking about the corsets of the 1830s. But I'm gonna call it corset just because it's a more universal term, and it's still correct. And also the corset that I'm replicating in this video it's listed as corset in the museum's listing, which is it's in the V&A museum. So as with most things, I really like to replicate details. And so when I find a museum piece that I can look at all the intricate stitching and details of something, it's just, I love trying to replicate those things in what I'm making. And then also with this one, I found the pattern, or at least a very, very, very similar pattern in one of my books. This pattern that I found is in the books Corset and Crinolines by Nora Waugh. I've used this book a lot for other corset patterns. It's great, and for the most part, when I upscale or scale up the pattern that's in there, they're very close to my size, which is the same for this corset, which is really handy. I don't have to do much adjustments. But anyway, I found that pattern. I saw it. It's just beautiful patterning and all that. And then I saw the picture of the one in the V&A, and it's just, the stitching is so good. I love it. And I am going to do my best to replicate all the different lines and stitchings and quiltings and all that. Let's get started. So with the pattern from the book, I first scanned it and then enlarged it in Illustrator. From there, I was able to print it out and move on to creating a mock-up. After trying that mock-up on, it was nearly perfect. Just a slight adjustment on the side and it's good to go. From here, I also determine what width of boning will be placed at each area. I'm using synthetic whalebone in 3/8 inch and 1/4 inch. For the layers of this corset, it's going to be 2 layers of cotton sateen and 1 of a sturdy linen. The linen layer is basted to one of the layers of sateen, and that's the outer piece. And the second sateen layer is the lining. For the assembly of this, I'm going to go panel by panel, adding in all the details of each panel before going on to the next one. For the back pieces, the center back seam is sewn right sides together with the lining and outer layer, and then turned wrong sides in. This has a larger seam allowance, so when they're turned inside, there's an extra layer of strength for where the eyelets will be. The other edge has the seam allowance turned in and pressed in place. All the seams of this corset will be sewn with English seams, which involves having all the seam allowances already turned in before sewing. It's kind of weird, but I learned the seam when sewing my 18th century project, and I absolutely love how it came together. Now it's time to start placing all the lines for piping and quilting, which is the majority of the structure to this corset. I decided to use a thick quilting thread for all my top stitching so that stitching stands out and seems more like hand stitching. Most of the cording placement is quite tight and are in hard to reach places, so I'm just sewing all the lines and then I'll place the cording later. And to keep the extra bulkiness of back stitching to lock these stitches, I'm not back stitching and I'm leaving long tails of thread, which will then be brought to the back and woven in back there. This process definitely took some time, but I really am glad I did it. Now with those threads tucked away, the cording can be placed, which is done using this large needle. At the end, it's poked through, and while doing this, I'm trying to not break the threads of the fabric, simply separating them as I pull the cording out. Once the cording's clipped, I then go over it and try to get the threads to go back in place, closing up the hole. The front piece has 4 bust gussets. Slits are cut in this main panel, and then a 1/4 inch is folded in and ironed in place. The gusset is then placed in this slit and top stitched down. On the side panel, there's a large hip gusset placed. These are placed in just the outer fabric, which is the basted linen and sateen. The lining layer is then placed on the back, and the seam allowance is turned under and then hand sewn in place. For the side piece, there's various pieces of cording to place and also sections where there's this quilting aspect. Due to the pattern of these being little squares, I thought it'd be easier to hand sew them all. After these little squares have been sewn, I'm now going to stuff the lines that they've created with cotton stuffing. This method is called Trapunto, and I saw it in the V&A's corset listing and researched it, and it's creating a higher raised quilting aspect. I thought it was a fun method to try out. It took several attempts to finally figure out a method, but I finally did, and it worked well. It involved getting the stuffing fibers to be all in the same line and then twisting them to add some strength to it so it can be pulled through with the large needle. There's a lot of patience involved to not pull too quickly or too hard, because that would untwist the fibers and just pull most of the stuffing out or have a weird gappy, bumpy feel to the stuffing. And so just a lot of patience, slowly pulling, got the job done. Moving on to the front section, there are so many angles and curves and lines to be sewn for the cording and the quilting. I love all the details it has, but it's gonna take some time. All of these placements are of course based on the corset and the V&A. Before going on to assembling the panels, the back does need some eyelets, which will be hand sewn using a buttonhole stitch. And the spacing is replicated based on the pattern, and it is spiral laced. With all these panels done, it's now time to use the English seam to completely assemble them. The seam is done with the two panels right sides together, and the seam allowances have already been turned in. And at the folded edges is where the seam is sewn. There's 4 edges there, 2 of the right side edges close together, and then a lining edge on both sides. The stitch goes through 3 folded edges each time. The 2 middle right sides are always gone through, plus 1 lining edge. I would recommend watching the section in my 18th century dress video for a better explanation and visualization of this seam. I highly recommend learning it because it's so fun and I think you'll have a blast learning it. Once the panels are sewn together, they simply are opened up and ironed, and then all the boning can be inserted. But there's not much of it. This style of corset has way less boning than a majority of historical corsets. The structure comes from all that cording and quilting. Some final touches include attaching straps, which are still in fashion for this corset in the 1830s. And then there's binding to be sewn on both the top and bottom edge. The top bust edge will have ties enclosed in the binding edge to be able to loosen or tighten it. At the center front, I created a small hole in the back side of the binding, and this is where the ties will come out. The last couple things is to create some eyelets on the straps so that they can be tied. And then on the lining layer at center front, so the inside of the corset, I bound a very large slit. This will allow the large wooden busk to be inserted. These type of busks were removable, and there's various ways to create the opening, but I decided to do this one. I will say trying to get the corset on with the busk inserted is not impossible, but it is difficult. So I can see why they designed these corsets to have them removable, and once you have the corset laced on, you then insert the busk, even though it looks very funny. So there you have it, my 1830s corset, which is kind of hand sewn and kind of not, and kind of a mishmash of different techniques that I've learned recently or just learned for this corset. But this corset overall took 30 hours to create, which is actually quite a lot considering how much machine stitching I actually did. So I recently made a pair of 18th century stays that were completely hand sewn. They're half bone stays, and those took about 50 hours to make. Now these took 30 hours and that wasn't completely hand sewn. So I think these would have taken way longer to make overall if I completely hand sewed it, which they would have done in that era because they didn't have sewing machines. But I loved kind of mixing that to like have the easy straight stitching done with machine, but then just being able to go in there with some hand sewing and get some of those details in. And also I realized I didn't put the embroidery kind of details on that front, which I might end up doing because I really liked what that added, but at the same time I just forgot, and it's fine. It's not gonna affect the structure of it. It's just more the perfectionist in me. Anyway, with all that, the corset and the chemise and drawers are done, and now we can go on the next important structure of any historical look, and that's the petticoats and the bustle. And stay tuned for the rest of the Ariel inspired project videos. As always, a huge thank you to my patrons, YouTube members, and Instagram subscribers. Always gotta get the right wording for those. Thank you so much for being here and supporting me on this journey. If you want to learn more about any of those platforms, you can subscribe and also have some sneak peek photos and information about project or multiple projects that I'll be sharing about this coming late summer into the fall, probably till the end of the year. Really exciting projects. I went to New Zealand, and so you can see some sneak peeks of that. But anyway, thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. And as I say and have updated, learn always, create with passion, and inspire others. This video is sponsored by Xtool. Xtool is redefining screen printing, and I am here for it. I recently shared a full video looking at the different products that they sent me. I was able to create and print on so many different things, and it was such a neat experience. Instead of the standard way of spreading photo emulsion on your screens, waiting for it to dry, and then using the sun to burn the screens, you simply place a pre-emulsion screen into the frame, which you then easily stretch with these really nifty wrenches. Anyway, after that, you place it in the laser and then let it etch out your design perfectly. That's it. You can then screen print away to your heart's desire. But not only that, they have this frame station that allows you to lock in the frame, lift it up, and then it just hovers there while you switch out the material that you're printing on below. It's so cool. And also there's a magnet on that frame that allows the little squeegee to magnet there, and then it just stays there as you lift it. It's so cool. Plus, with the precision of the laser, you can create multi-screens perfect for multicolored printing. It places the design in the exact same spot on the different screens, which then allows you to print separate colors all in the exact correct place, and that produces a wonderful multicolored print. I also explored printing with bitmap images, which isn't something I would have ever tried with the old method of screen printing, but with the precision of the laser and the multi-frame placement and all that, I was trying it and it was so neat. The possibilities with the Xtool products are endless. So if you're interested in learning more about this precision, sped up process of screen printing, I highly recommend you check out Xtool and their products. Click the link in my description to learn more about it. And also, if you want to just see the process more clearly, be sure to click the link for that video that I recently published.